Hi everyone, my name is Michael Daniel Lopez and my nickname is Milo Lopez and I'm taking up GE Lit 2 from the section Z08. And why am I making this vlog? I'm making this vlog to look back at the past lessons we had in GE Lit 2 and I'm gonna provide takeaways from each modules and to try to synthesize everything that has happened. So the first module is the national and the global rev. The first takeaway that I noticed in module one is that people will blindly follow tradition, just like in the lottery, even when the tradition is violent or meaningless. And we could also see this in real life. For example, if there's someone who questions the government, people would it has become part of our tradition to brand those people or brand the people who questions the government as someone who are part of the CPP or they are in short red tag. And what struck me about the lottery is how ordinary cruelty becomes when people stops questioning it. Because in the story, the townspeople stoned the woman to death simply because it was tradition. They didn't even question the tradition. There was no logic, no reflection, and no remorse. And it made me realize how dangerous it is when a society chooses comfort of ignorance over critical thinking. And when people inherit a ritual, they often accept it without asking who benefits it, who suffers, and what's the purpose of this tradition. And the story becomes a warning to us that evil doesn't always come from villains, and it sometimes come from communities who just follow the rules or don't question anything at all. And that's something that we need to avoid as a society. And the second one, my second takeaway would be most of the time when people speak up, they are silenced. And I noticed it in the 2 plus 2 equals 5 in of Orwell in YouTube. Our professor asked us to watch a short video entitled 2 plus 2 plus 5. I mean, 2 plus 2 equals 5. And the idea that 2 plus 2 equals 5 showed me is how power can reshape the truth itself. We could always see this in our society because in our country, when you have power, when you are famous, when you have money, you could run away basically from the law. Because, for example, the plunderers like Bong Revilla, the the criminals in our politics like um Mar no, not Marcos. Yeah, I mean he is a criminal, but he is already dead. And Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Those people who had cases, who had proven cases, are still able to run for office. So it's something to think about. And if you challenge the narrative, you get punished. It reflects real world systems where people who question authority are shamed, ignored, silenced, and even red tagged. Because a lot of campus journalists or a lot of students who go to rallies are red tagged and it endangers their lives. And whether it's oppressive governments, institution, or even peer pressure, the message is very, very clear in 2 plus 2 equals 5. People in power fear truth. And that's why I think they also say that knowledge is power because having knowledge frees people. It frees different types of people. And those people with power prefer blind obedience over honesty because it keeps them with something that pleasures them, which is power. And this made me think how important and dangerous it is to stand up for what's real. The more we notice that this mindset, this blind obedience is dangerous, the more we need to speak up, because who would speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves? And who would stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves? Who would fight for the oppressed? The third realization or takeaway I got from module one is subversion is an essential part of literature of post-colonial countries, because writing becomes a way to reclaim voice, identity, and truth. And it's so interesting to think that because of Tom Nicholson's video on post-colonialism, I realized that the Avatar and the Black Panther are subversive form of visual literature, and it's really interesting also to say how literature has evolved. And yeah, literature has evolved in such a way that it's more contemporary. It adheres more to the standards of the new generation. And I think it's also important to know that literature is also evolving. And one of the biggest takeaway I had with that video is that post-colonial literature is not passive. It fights back. And it subverts the colonizers' narratives by rewriting history from the perspective of the oppressed. For example, um, before, Filipinos are branded tamad by the Spanish people. But in reality, these Filipinos wake up so early, like 4 a.m. in the morning, and when the Spaniards arrive, they are just resting because they've been up early in the morning. And these rewriting of the history or the perspective can mean reclaiming language, exposing stereotypes, or challenging the version of the reality imposed by the colonizers or imperial powers. And subversion becomes survival, and it also becomes healing, and it becomes a way for the formerly colonized people to finally speak after centuries of being spoken for, or rather, after centuries of being silenced. And this is why post-colonial texts feel so powerful and raw. They aren't just stories, they are acts of reclaiming justice. And now, we've already finished module one. Let's go no now go to module two, which is colonial past and post-colonial present. And I would like to deeper on the video of Tom Nicholas about post-colonialism. My key takeaway from that is that post-colonial theory exposes how colonialism continues shaping identity, knowledge, and cultural power even long after independence. And he explained that literature is never neutral. There's always two sides. It's either it reinforces or resists dominance. He emphasizes also the discourse, representation, and power on how the colonizers created narratives that made themselves the civilized one and the colonized the savage or inferior ones. And this made me realize that even today, many stereotypes and standards of beauty and ideas of or success or taste still come from colonial frameworks. And it's not something that's just political, because colonialism lives inside our culture and even inside people's thoughts. For example, in the Philippines, if you say something if you see something branded, most people would say that, branded yan. It's branded, so it must be better. And it's something that colonialism has imposed on our culture and our thoughts. And it's interesting to think that post-colonialism manifests in some of the smallest down to the biggest manifestation in our society. And second one is the danger of the single story. And my takeaway is that the story reveals how hearing only one narrative about people leads to misunderstanding, dehumanization, and prejudice. And I believe that, and based on my observation, this takeaway also connects to the past two topics that I've talked about. And the single story is a colonial tool. It simplifies whole identities into stereotypes. Such, for example, it said that Africans are poor, Filipinos are domestic workers, or Western culture is superior. And another thing that I can say about it mm, is how deeper awareness of how stories create power dynamics is really, really important, because when you read as a story, you also need to look about the dynamics beyond writing the story. And whoever controls the narrative controls how the world is seen. And this material strongly connects to Filipino post-colonial identity, just like what I'm mentioning a while ago, and how our own stories were replaced by the American or Spanish narratives, and how now we must continue to reclaim our identity, even it has been over 100 years since we were colonized. The third one is my most favorite one out of the all modules, and out of all the texts and pieces of literature in all the modules. Third one is from The Children Will Listen and You've Got to Be Carefully Taught. And these songs reveals how prejudice and social hierarchies are taught and passed down. And it's not born. Children learn fear, they learn racism, they learn biases through institutions, parents, media, and culture. It echoes how colonial ideologies were also taught and normalized for generations. You've got the song You've Got to Be Carefully Taught directly exposes how hate and racial division are deliberately created to maintain power structures. And the song The Children Will Listen shows the long term consequences. The things society teaches becomes internalized, and it passes down from generation to generation. And if we're not careful about it, and if we're not careful about what we would teach the children, these these internalized teaches becomes the norm for a lot of years, and it's very, very dangerous because the cycle of hatred and prejudice continues. And this aligns with the post-colonial ideas and how col- colonized subjects absorb harmful beliefs about themselves, which shapes their identity and behavior. So now, since we're done with this module 2, I'm gonna discuss module 3. For Rupika Oris, I'm taking my body back. I realized that healing becomes an act of resistance when your body was once taken from you. And watching Rupika Or perform this piece really felt heavy in my chest because she speaks from a place most people are scared to revisit. And she talks about how someone took control of her body in the moment where she had none. And you can feel the pain behind her steady voice. But the most powerful part for me is that when she keeps repeating, I'm taking my body back. Because it's, for me, it's not just a line. It feels something like she's slowly stitching herself together each time she says it. And her tone, her pauses, and the way she stands without breaking down all of that shows someone fighting to reclaim something that was stolen from them. And it reminded me that healing isn't just recovery, it's also rebellion. And sometimes rebellion is necessary. The second one is that not all desires are spoken. Some are forced through silence and subtle pressure. And I got this from Hills Like White Elephants. And what hit me in Ernest Hemingway's story is is how their conversation feels so real. It's about two people talking. No, they're talking, but they're not really talking. And the guy keeps saying that it's just a simple operation and pretending that he's being supportive, but everything in his tone feels like he's pushing her toward the choice that he wants. It's like silent manipulation. And in the story, you could feel Jig shrinking emotionally as she look at the hills and she's trying to escape even for a second. And when she says, "Would you please, 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 please stop talking?" It suddenly felt like a breaking point. It's like she's drowning in his pressure even though he never raises his voice. And I think it's an example of passive aggressiveness. And that's the scary part. Sometimes the most controlling desires come from people with rap and calm voices. For example, in politics, those people who are charismatic towards the masses and the campaign period are the most corrupt ones. For example, Bong Revilla. And the story felt like a reminder that emotional manipulation doesn't need yelling. And it can come in the form of saying that I only want what's the best for us. And the third one is from Dear Evan Hansen. And it's also ironic because right now I have a cast just like Dear Evan Hansen. And I want to say that Evan's story hurt in a very human way because it shows that what loneliness can make someone do. In the song, in the song Waving Through a Window, when he says he feels like people don't even notice he exists, it's something a lot of us quietly feel but never admit. We've all come to a point where we felt that in our lives. And so when Connor's parents finally gave him attention, you understand why he clings to it even though it's built on a lie. And Evan fabricates emails, invents memories, and lets himself be pulled into a life that isn't his. And and it's not because he wants to hurt I mean it's not because he wants to hurt anyone, but because he finally feels important and heard. And it shows how desire isn't always about romantic or physical affection. And sometimes it's the simple desire to be seen, heard, and cared about. And someone and when someone is starved of that for too long, even the wrong things can start to feel right. And I just wanna ask you guys a question. Could we really blame them if that's their case? And finally, we finish all of the modules. And I would like to share two contributions to my development upon taking GLIT 2. GLIT 2 taught me to be patient with myself, with others, and with the world I'm trying to understand. Throughout the modules, especially when dealing with difficult themes like trauma, colonialism, conflicting desires, I learned that understanding takes time. And some texts were uncomfortable and some really challenged my ideas, my beliefs, and some discussions forced me to slow down and listen before reacting. And instead of rushing to finish a reading, the class taught me to become patient with it, to sit with it, to feel the discomfort of the people in the stories, to question the narratives, and to let the meaning unfold right in my eyes. And this patience extends to real life. It's reminding me to become more patient with people's stories. It's reminded me to have more understanding of different experiences of people and become more aware that everyone carries their own battles. And as a member of a society and as a student, this helps me respond with empathy and instead of judgment. And it's something I would like to pass down to my future children. Just like in the songs, be careful what you teach children. And second one is that GLIT 2 strengthened my ability to think critically, not just academically, but in the way I interpret the world and the systems around me. Because the class constantly pushed me to look deeper, to question realities, for example, in the lottery, and to recognize silencing or oppression in 2 plus 2 equals 5, and to identify power structures in post colonial texts, and to analyze desire beyond surface level actions, just like dear Evan Hansen. And instead of accepting narratives at face value, I learned to ask who is the one speaking, who is silent, who benefits, and who is the one who's harmed. And this kind of critical thinking goes beyond El Salle University. It affects how I view media, politics, society, and even everyday conversations. And it made me more aware of the injustice and more sensitive of the marginalized voices. And I'm now more capable of forming my own and informed opinions, and instead of simply following what's given to me. And critical thinking for me is not just a skill that you would learn or you should learn. It's a social responsibility in each and every one of us. And now I'm gonna give my three takeaways from class. First one is mm, the elements of fiction taught me that every detail in a story is a choice, and every choice reveals something about the human experience. Before this class, I used to read stories just for the plot or just for the sake of completing a requirement. But learning about the character, the setting, conflict symbolism, and point of views rather, made me realize how intentional writers really are. Even a simple description or a small line of a dialogue can expose a character's fears, desires, or hidden truths. And understanding this made me read more slowly and pay attention to things I used to ignore. And like why an author chooses a certain setting or why a character feel repeats a phrase, it changed the way I read and even the way I see people. Because real life also has narrative choices behind people's actions. And it also reminds me to become more intentional in a way that we must move or act like everything that we would do from now on would affect the future that we have. And as an aspiring actor, everything that I do, the workshop I go to, the stories I read, the characterization I love, I have the learnings from every performance and the notes I write every rehearsal. These are all vital to my becoming of a person and as an actor. And for the second one, the hero's journey made me realize that real life works the same way. You meet people who try to break you down while achieving your dreams. Others would try to help you grow and help you. But the only way forward is to persevere through adversity, no matter what happens. And when we talk about the hero's journey, the call to adventure, the trials, the mentors, the enemies, and the transformation, it feels less like a story pattern for me. And it feels like a mirror to reality because I realize that every person we meet plays a role in our story. Some become obstacles, some become guides, some teach us hard lessons. But like any other hero, we're expected to keep pushing even when the path is uncomfortable. And what struck me the most is that the journey is never about staying perfect. It's about showing up, surviving difficult chapters, and letting challenges shape you into someone stronger with better judgment and better view of the world. And in the end, everything I learned GLE 2, from the stories of the colonized to the voices reclaiming their bodies to the heroes who keep getting setbacks, reminded me that every person is the protagonist of their own journey. And as cliche as it sounds, we are the drivers of our own lives. Whether you're an inspiring actor like me, a writer, an engineer, a doctor, or simply someone trying to find your place in the world, we are all shaped by the narratives we encounter and the courage it takes to face them. This class taught me to be patient with my growth, to think critically about the world around me, and recognize the stories of both parties. And as I continue my path in acting, I carry with me the understanding that every role, in- including the role in my life and the role of my co-actors, demands empathy, reflection, and commitment. And no matter what profession any of us would choose, we all have the responsibility to rewrite harmful traditions, challenge silences with truth, and use our own voice with purpose. Because our journey will never be perfect. It would never be perfect. And there's no such thing as perfect. But they would always be worth taking. And so as long as we keep moving forward, we keep learning and keep choosing who we become to be for the rest of our lives. And that is all. Thank you for listening.